The Three Knocks, created and written by Elias Del Rio. Chapter 3, Dream a Little. Morning had always been predictable. Coffee, toast, the local news playing quietly in the background. My dad complaining about traffic before he even left for work. My mom reminding everyone not to forget something on the way out the door. Routine. It was amazing how many things you never noticed until they stopped happening. The house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The empty kind. The kind that reminded you someone wasn't coming back. My sister leaned against the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee cradled between both hands. I looked toward the counter and stopped. The bouquet wasn't there. I could have sworn I'd left it beside the coffee maker before going upstairs. I looked around the room. There, in the center of the dining room table, the roses sat perfectly arranged in a glass vase. "Did you move the flowers?" My sister turned around. "The flowers?" "The roses," I clarified. She looked toward the dining room. "I thought you did," she replied. Maybe I had. Maybe I was just tired. I couldn't remember. I walked over to the table and rested my hand on the vase. It felt ordinary. I reached for one of the stems. Cold. Not enough to hurt, just enough to make me hesitate. When I touched it again, it felt normal. The rest of the morning passed quietly. My sister stayed downstairs while I wandered through the house looking for something to do. Anything. Keeping busy felt easier than sitting still. I ended up back in the kitchen. The refrigerator was full of things neither of us had touched in over a week. Milk, eggs, leftovers Mom had made, a carton of orange juice my dad always bought. I wasn't even hungry. I just needed something to occupy my hands. A yellow grocery list was held to the refrigerator by a small magnet. It was my mom's handwriting. Bread, coffee, bananas, paper towels. Nothing special. Just another list. She had probably written it the morning before everything happened. Then I pulled the paper off the refrigerator, folded it once, and dropped it into the kitchen trash. I closed the refrigerator, made another cup of coffee, walked into the living room, sat down, and turned on the television. I don't remember what was on. When I went back into the kitchen to rinse out my mug, I opened the refrigerator. The grocery list was back, held beneath the same little magnet. I stopped. Bread, coffee, bananas, paper towels. Exactly the way she'd written it. No, I had thrown it away, hadn't I? I looked toward the trash can. The lid was closed. I didn't open it. Instead, I pulled the list from the refrigerator and turned it over. Blank. The same crease from where I'd folded it. I stood there for a long time trying to remember. Eventually, I placed the list on the kitchen counter and walked away. By lunchtime, neither of us had accomplished much. We had walked from room to room, opened drawers, closed them again, picked things up, set them back where they belonged. It wasn't that we didn't know where to start. It was that every room felt like we were disturbing something that wasn't supposed to be touched. My sister finally broke the silence. "We should probably start going through some of their things," she said. Family photographs lined the fireplace. My dad's reading glasses still rested on the end table beside his chair. My mom's favorite blanket was folded neatly over the couch. Everything looked exactly the way they'd left it. "I know," I replied. After a long moment, my sister walked over to the bookshelf and picked up a framed picture of the four of us at the beach. "I forgot how much Dad hated the sand," she said with a small smile. I couldn't help but laugh. He spent the whole day trying to keep it out of his shoes. "He still complained about it for a week," she added. Her smile faded as she returned the picture to the shelf. "What do we do with all of this?" she asked. I followed her eyes around the room. The photographs, the books, the furniture, their jackets still hanging by the front door. "I don't know," she nodded. "I keep thinking they're going to walk back through the front door." I swallowed. So do I. Neither of us said anything after that. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar. We had learned over the past week that sometimes silence was easier than saying the wrong thing. My sister disappeared upstairs. She said she was going to sort through our mom's closet. I stayed downstairs. I wasn't ready for their bedroom yet. The living room felt easier. At least I thought it would. I grabbed an empty cardboard box from the garage and set it on the floor. There weren't many things to pack, just a few magazines, some old mail, a stack of newspapers my dad had insisted on keeping for reasons I never understood. I knelt beside the box and started placing everything inside, one piece at a time. When I reached for another newspaper, I stopped. The box was full. I stared at it, neatly packed, folded, organized. The flaps were already closed and a strip of packing tape ran across the top. I frowned. I looked down. The tape dispenser was sitting on the floor beside me. The end of the tape was still stuck to the roll where I'd torn it. I had packed the box. I had to have. No one else was downstairs, but I couldn't remember doing any of it. Not filling the rest of the box, folding the flaps, or pulling the tape across the top. I stood there for a long moment, trying to remember. Nothing came. Eventually, I picked up a marker and wrote one word across the box. Living room. I carried it into the hallway. By the time I returned, I couldn't remember why I'd walked into the living room in the first place. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. The last week had been a blur. Sleep hadn't felt like sleep. The days seemed to run together. Everything inside the box was exactly the way I would have packed it. Neat, organized. The way my dad always insisted things should be. You're losing it, I muttered to myself. Grief did strange things to people. That was what everyone kept telling us. Maybe this was just another one of them. I left the box where it was and walked back into the kitchen. The coffee I'd poured earlier had gone cold. I dumped it into the sink and reached for the pot. As it filled my mug, I found myself staring through the window above the sink. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it always had. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A lawnmower hummed in the distance. Someone waved to a neighbor while walking past the house. Life had moved on. I wasn't sure how. I picked up my mug and turned toward the dining room. That was when I noticed the roses. I stopped. Something about them felt different. Maybe it was the sunlight or the way the shadows stretched across the table. Or maybe it was something else. I walked closer. The bouquet sat neatly on the dining room table. Not off to one side, not where someone would casually set flowers after walking through the front door. Perfectly centered, deliberately placed. I frowned. I was almost certain I'd left it on the kitchen counter. But something in the back of my mind told me I had already stood here once before, wondering the same thing. I tried to remember. Had I moved it? I couldn't remember. I reached toward the nearest rose. One of its petals had darkened around the edges. Not wilted, darkened. The color faded from deep red to almost black. I brushed my thumb across it. The petal was cold, the same unnatural cold I had felt when I first picked up the bouquet. I pulled my hand away. There was something beneath the flowers. A corner of white paper was barely visible between the stems and the vase. I moved one of the roses aside and reached for it. The paper was folded twice and damp around the edges. I unfolded it. Nothing was written on it. I turned it over. Blank. Just like the back of the grocery list. I stood there for a moment, staring at it and wondering if I had somehow overlooked something. I stared at the paper for a few seconds before letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was probably part of the wrapping, something the florist had used to hold the flowers together. That was all. I folded it again and placed it beside the vase. Upstairs, the floor creaked. Another creak followed, then another. Slow, measured, moving from one side of the hallway to the other. My sister was still sorting through Mom's closet. At least that was what she had said. "Are you okay up there?" I called. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, the house was completely silent. "Yeah," my sister answered. Her voice came from behind me. I turned around. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding one of Mom's old sweaters against her chest. I looked past her toward the second floor. "I thought you were upstairs." "I was," she replied. "I came down a few minutes ago." I looked toward the ceiling. Nothing moved. "You didn't hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" "The floor. It sounded like someone was walking upstairs." Her eyes stayed on mine for a moment before drifting toward the staircase. "It's an old house," she said. "I know. It makes noises." "I know." Neither of us sounded convinced. She walked into the living room and carefully placed Mom's sweater on the couch. Then she noticed the folded paper beside the vase. "What's that?" she asked. "I found it underneath the flowers." She picked it up and unfolded it. Her expression changed. "What?" I asked. Where did you get this? I just told you. It was under the flowers. She turned the paper around. There was writing on it now. 3 words written in thin, uneven letters. Dream a little. I stared at them. That wasn't there. My sister looked at the paper. What do you mean? It was blank. It's clearly not blank. I checked both sides. She studied my face. For a moment, I thought she might laugh. Tell me I was tired. Tell me I had overlooked it. Instead, she placed the note on the table. Neither of us touched it again. Who left the flowers? She asked. I don't know. Maybe there was a card we missed. There wasn't. Did you check? Yes. Her eyes shifted toward the bouquet. The darkened petal was red again. Perfect. Untouched. My sister leaned closer to the note. Do you recognize the handwriting? I shook my head. She didn't respond. What? It looks familiar. A chill passed through me. Whose is it? She stared at the 3 words, then looked toward the refrigerator. The yellow grocery list was hanging beneath the magnet again. I hadn't put it back. Slowly, my sister walked into the kitchen. She removed the list from beneath the magnet and carried it to the table. She placed both pieces of paper side by side. The letters weren't exactly the same, but they were close. The uneven curve of the D, the way the line crossed too far through the T, the slight tilt of every word toward the right. It looks like Mom's handwriting, she whispered. The house settled around us. Wood shifted inside the walls. The refrigerator hummed. The clock in the hallway remained silent. I stared at the note. Dream. A little. Then from somewhere upstairs, a woman began to hum.